December 11, 1941. 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Adolf Hitler stood before the Reichstag and made a decision that historians still struggle to comprehend. Germany declared war on the United States of America. This wasn't required by treaty. It wasn't militarily necessary. Japan had attacked America, not the other way around. Hitler could have stayed neutral. Instead, he voluntarily declared war on the world's largest industrial power, a nation that could outproduce Germany's entire war economy several times over. This single decision transformed World War II from a European and Asian conflict into a truly global war. And it guaranteed Nazi Germany's defeat. Today, we're examining one of history's most baffling strategic decisions, the day Hitler declared war on America and sealed his own fate. To understand why Hitler's declaration was so consequential, we need to understand America's position before December 1941. The United States was officially neutral. But this neutrality was increasingly fictional. President Franklin Roosevelt wanted to support Britain and the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany. But American public opinion was deeply divided. Isolationist sentiment remained powerful. Millions of Americans believed Europe's wars were not America's problem. Yet Roosevelt had been steadily moving America toward involvement. The Lend-Lease Act, passed in March 1941, allowed America to provide military equipment to Britain and later the Soviet Union. American factories were producing ships, aircraft, tanks, and weapons that were flowing to Germany's enemies. American warships were escorting convoys across the Atlantic, engaging in an undeclared naval war with German U-boats. Several incidents had already occurred. American destroyers had been attacked and damaged by German submarines. But none of these incidents had pushed America into formal war. Roosevelt couldn't declare war without public support, and that support didn't exist. Hitler, for his part, had been extremely careful to avoid giving Roosevelt a justification for war. He'd ordered U-boat commanders to avoid attacking American vessels when possible. He understood that bringing America fully into the war would be catastrophic for Germany. To understand why Hitler's declaration was so consequential, we need to understand America's position before December 1941. The United States was officially neutral. But this neutrality was increasingly fictional. President Franklin Roosevelt wanted to support Britain and the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany. But American public opinion was deeply divided. Isolationist sentiment remained powerful. Millions of Americans believed Europe's wars were not America's problem. Yet Roosevelt had been steadily moving America toward involvement. The Lend-Lease Act, passed in March 1941, allowed America to provide military equipment to Britain and later the Soviet Union. American factories were producing ships, aircraft, tanks, and weapons that were flowing to Germany's enemies. American warships were escorting convoys across the Atlantic, engaging in an undeclared naval war with German U-boats. Several incidents had already occurred. American destroyers had been attacked and damaged by German submarines. But none of these incidents had pushed America into formal war. Roosevelt couldn't declare war without public support, and that support didn't exist. Hitler, for his part, had been extremely careful to avoid giving Roosevelt a justification for war. He'd ordered U-boat commanders to avoid attacking American vessels when possible. He understood that bringing America fully into the war would be catastrophic for Germany. December 7, 1941. The date that changed everything. Japanese carrier aircraft struck the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. In 2 hours, the attack killed over 2,400 Americans, sank or damaged 8 battleships, and destroyed nearly 200 aircraft. America erupted in fury. The isolationist movement collapsed overnight. On December 8, President Roosevelt asked Congress for a declaration of war against Japan. The vote was nearly unanimous, only one member of Congress voted against it. America was now at war. But only with Japan. Britain immediately declared war on Japan in solidarity with America. But Germany had not been attacked. The Tripartite Pact didn't require Germany to do anything. Japan had launched an offensive war, not a defensive one. Hitler could have remained at peace with America while Japan fought alone in the Pacific. For 4 critical days, Hitler considered his options. Those 4 days would determine the outcome of World War II. When Hitler first learned of Pearl Harbor, his initial reaction was jubilation. He saw Japan's attack as a strategic gift. America's attention and resources would now be diverted to the Pacific. The pressure on Germany might ease. But then came the question, should Germany formally declare war on the United States? Hitler's military advisors were divided. The German Navy strongly supported a declaration of war. Admiral Raeder and the U-boat commanders had been fighting under crippling restrictions ordered to avoid American ships even when they were clearly supporting Britain. A formal declaration of war would unleash the U-boats to attack American shipping without restraint. Perhaps they could strangle the Atlantic supply line before American military power could fully mobilize. The German Army and Luftwaffe were less enthusiastic. They recognized that America's industrial capacity was enormous. Formal war would mean facing American bombers over Europe and American troops on future battlefields. But Hitler's thinking was driven by other factors. He believed war with America was inevitable anyway. The undeclared naval war in the Atlantic was already occurring. American factories were already producing weapons for Germany's enemies. In Hitler's mind, America was already his enemy. A declaration of war would simply make it official and allow Germany to fight without restraints. Hitler's decision wasn't purely strategic, it was deeply ideological. Hitler had contempt for American democracy and its multi-ethnic society. He saw America as weak, corrupted by capitalism and Jewish influence. He believed American society was soft, incapable of sustaining the sacrifice required for industrial war. Hitler had convinced himself that America's military power was overrated. He focused on American isolationism and political divisions as signs of weakness. He ignored the industrial statistics that showed American production capacity dwarfing Germany's. This was Hitler's characteristic flaw: he let ideology override reality. Just as he'd underestimated the Soviet Union's capacity to resist, he now underestimated America's capacity to wage war. Hitler also calculated that Japan's success in the Pacific would keep America focused on Asia. He believed the war in Europe would be decided before American power could be brought to bear. By the time America could mobilize and deploy significant forces to Europe, Hitler expected to have defeated the Soviet Union and consolidated German control over the continent. Then Germany would be impregnable. This analysis was completely wrong. But Hitler believed it absolutely. On December 11, 1941, Hitler summoned the Reichstag to the Kroll Opera House in Berlin. He delivered a lengthy speech reviewing the war's progress and justifying Germany's actions. Then came the critical moment. Hitler declared that America, under Roosevelt's leadership, had systematically violated neutrality and provoked Germany. He cited American naval attacks on German U-boats, Lend-Lease aid to Britain and the Soviet Union, and Roosevelt's inflammatory anti-German rhetoric. Therefore, Hitler announced, Germany was now in a state of war with the United States. Within hours, Italy also declared war on America, fulfilling its obligations under the Tripartite Pact. The declarations were met with approval in the Reichstag and Nazi leadership. They believed Hitler's assessment that war with America was inevitable and that striking now, when America was reeling from Pearl Harbor, was preferable to waiting. But outside Germany, the reaction was very different. In Washington, Roosevelt and his advisors could barely believe their good fortune. Hitler had solved Roosevelt's greatest political problem, how to justify American involvement in the European war. Now Germany had declared war on America. No political debate was necessary. Congress immediately voted to declare war on Germany and Italy. America was now fully committed to defeating the Axis powers on all fronts. Hitler's declaration of war on America ranks among history's greatest strategic blunders. The United States possessed advantages that Germany simply couldn't match. American industrial production exceeded the combined output of Germany, Japan, and Italy. By 1943, America would be producing more aircraft, ships, tanks, and vehicles than all other nations combined. The American economy could sustain total war while maintaining civilian living standards. American territory was completely invulnerable to Axis attack. While German and Japanese cities would be bombed into rubble, American factories operated in perfect safety. America could mobilize millions of soldiers while maintaining agricultural and industrial production. The U.S. population of 130 million was far larger than Germany's 70 million. And those people were well-fed, healthy, and motivated. Perhaps most critically, America's declaration of war meant coordination with Britain and the Soviet Union. The Grand Alliance, America, Britain, and the Soviet Union, now combined resources against Germany. Hitler had created the exact coalition he couldn't defeat. Without American involvement, Stalin might have been forced to negotiate with Hitler. Britain might have settled for a compromise peace. Instead, Hitler faced enemies who were now committed to Germany's unconditional surrender and had the resources to achieve it. The immediate military impact of America's entry took time to develop. But when it came, it was overwhelming. American troops began arriving in Britain in 1942. Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa, brought American forces into combat against German troops. By 1943, American and British forces invaded Sicily, then Italy. The Wehrmacht now fought on multiple fronts. American bombers joined British aircraft in the strategic bombing campaign against German cities and industry. The combined bomber offensive devastated German production capacity and forced Germany to divert resources to air defense that were desperately needed on other fronts. The U-boat war, which German admirals had hoped would be won by unrestricted submarine warfare, turned into a disaster. American shipbuilding outpaced U-boat successes. Convoy escorts improved. By 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic was effectively won by the Allies. American Lend-Lease aid to the Soviet Union proved crucial on the Eastern Front. American trucks, aircraft, food, and raw materials kept the Red Army supplied while Soviet industry focused on producing tanks and weapons. And looming over everything was D-Day. The invasion of Normandy in June 1944. was made possible by American industrial might, the ships, landing craft, vehicles, and supplies that allowed the largest amphibious invasion in history. German forces now fought on 3 major fronts simultaneously, a situation that guaranteed defeat. What would have happened if Hitler had not declared war on America? This is one of history's great counterfactual questions. Without a German declaration, Roosevelt would have faced enormous difficulty bringing America into the European war. American public opinion was focused on Japan. The isolationist movement, though weakened, would have opposed involving America in Europe while fighting Japan in the Pacific. Hitler could have maintained the pretense of avoiding conflict with America while America focused on the Pacific. This might have bought Germany precious time. Without American involvement, Britain would have been limited to defending its empire and conducting peripheral campaigns. The strategic bombing of Germany would have been less severe. Most importantly, the invasion of France might never have occurred, or been delayed for years. Germany could have concentrated forces against the Soviet Union. Whether this would have changed the ultimate outcome is debatable. Soviet industrial capacity and manpower were enormous. But it would have made Germany's situation far less hopeless. Instead, Hitler chose to declare war on a nation that would bring overwhelming force against him. It was a decision born of ideology, miscalculation, and a fatal underestimation of American power. Hitler's decision to declare war on America revealed fundamental flaws in his strategic thinking. He consistently underestimated his opponents. He'd underestimated Polish resistance. But Poland fell quickly, so the error didn't matter. He'd underestimated French capabilities. But France's military and political collapse vindicated his gamble. This pattern of successful aggression despite underestimating opponents created dangerous overconfidence. With America, Hitler made several critical miscalculations. He underestimated American industrial capacity, believing Germany's mobilized war economy could match American production. The reality was that American peacetime production exceeded German wartime output. He underestimated American military potential, believing Americans lacked the will and capability for sustained warfare. He was proved catastrophically wrong. He underestimated how long the war would last, believing Germany would defeat the Soviet Union before American power could be brought to bear. Instead, the Eastern Front became a meat grinder that consumed German armies while America steadily mobilized. Most fundamentally, Hitler failed to understand that declaring war on America eliminated any possibility of a negotiated peace. With America committed to unconditional surrender, Germany's only options were total victory or total defeat. And total victory against the combined might of America, Britain, and the Soviet Union was impossible. December 11, 1941 stands as one of history's pivotal moments, the day Adolf Hitler voluntarily declared war on the world's greatest industrial power. This decision wasn't forced by military necessity or treaty obligation. It was a choice driven by ideology, strategic miscalculation, and a fatal underestimation of American capabilities. Hitler believed he was formalizing a war that already existed. Instead, he created the coalition that would destroy Nazi Germany. Within 4 years, American soldiers would be fighting in France and Germany. American bombers would reduce German cities to rubble. American industrial production would arm the Soviet Union and sustain British resistance. And American power would be instrumental in forcing Germany's unconditional surrender. Sometimes in history, a single decision determines the fate of nations. Hitler's declaration of war on America guaranteed that World War II would end with Germany's total defeat. It transformed a European conflict into a global war that Germany could not win. And it ensured that the world's most powerful democracy would be committed to destroying fascism. On December 11, 1941, Adolf Hitler sealed his own fate and the fate of the Third Reich. Not through military defeat on the battlefield, but through a strategic decision that ranks among the greatest blunders in military history. He declared war on America and in doing so, declared Germany's defeat.